you did a full-fledged wedding ceremony as a way for the village to welcome Nancy to the village. Is that it?
That's right. They even prepared a document, but it was an excuse for a party and for me to entertain my hosts because they were particularly helpful. And
hello, everyone. This is Mark Peterson with the Frog Outside the Well Research Center. Today, I have a very special guest. He's an old friend of mine. We've known each other, Paul, for 56 years.
Old.
Yes. But old is a relative thing. As you shall see, Paul does a lot of very young sorts of things. And Paul is, let me show you. Paul is a business consultant, business advisor. Here's a picture of him hard at work, telling people how they can better improve their lives and their company. You call it leadership training and human relations training. This is when Paul and I were missionaries back in 1960. You were there from 63 to 66, right?
64, yeah.
64 to 66?
Yep. 2.5 years.
Here you are when this is about how you looked when I first met you. 10 years later, you came back to Korea, this time as a graduate student. Here you are with your graduate assistant, Keegan Ho, and a nameless monk doing some of your field work.
We were out having fun, getting acquainted with Korea, right? For me.
Going to a Buddhist temple. But the point is of the research that you did as an anthropologist was a village study. That's what anthropologists do. They don't always end up in the corporate world like you did. Most academics, most anthropologists end up as academics, but you settled in this beautiful little village with a rainbow. The rainbow was always over it, right? All the time?
It was Shangri-La. You'll notice the thatched roofs. People.
This was pre-Semal Undong.
Well, it was just at the beginning. By the time I left the village, there were very few thatched roofs left.
And it was traditional labor. These days, of course, they have machines that do this. But in those days, you plant the rice and then you wait for the rice to grow. This is a beautiful picture, the luxurious countryside.
Rice is just glorious when it's growing.
The
same area with winter.
The point here is that you spent a solid year in the village, which is Anthropology 101, to live out one whole year cycle in a new setting for anthropologists. So you spent a whole year there, and you saw the harvesting of the rice and the harvesting of the sesame seeds, and people were working all the time. It's hard work.
And having fun too. As you see from the smiles.
And it was
modest. It was a modest place.
You're not going to say poor.
Not fancy. No, this was not a poor village at all. There were some very prosperous people in the village, and all the way down to people who had no land and worked wages on the farms.
Here's the local laundromat.
Yep, there it is. Aleto.
And here we are making songpyeon for the fall harvest, I guess, fall celebrations. Off to the left, you've got a hand tractor. You were there at the time where they were still using oxen and hand tractors were just coming in. Is that right?
We just had one or two of those. We had lots of oxen. I lived in a compound where we had a beautiful ox who got fed perhaps as well as or better than the people in there because he was very precious.
When my wife and I visited you, my wife told me the other day that one of her memories is that when the mother of the house was washing the rice and preparing it to cook, the washings, that's sort of a milky white, has some degree of nutrition in it, that was poured into the cow's trough. So
Yep.
not an ounce of nutrition was wasted, and the ox was well taken care of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, in
Prize.
traditional times, you have the Yotchangsa. He didn't live in the village. He came to visit, right?
Yeah, he was an outsider, and we didn't have that many cans to give him, but kids would give him whatever bottles, and from Bacchus D.
Bottles and cans to get the candy, huh?
Yeah.
And here are the kids doing the seesaw. And here are some of the old men. We want to talk at some point about the age sets, how people met in age groups. Here's the old men's center. And some of these old men.
This is summer for sure. Look at their
Yeah.
nice white linen clothing, and it's very breezy.
Yeah, this is the air
And
conditioning.
The wooden pillows.
Yeah. You had no air conditioning at all, right?
Oh, no, that was not even a concept there.
Yeah. Well, those old men and the others in the village, I'm going to jump ahead to these old men. These are prominent leaders of the village, right?
They are, and they're very well educated in the Confucian classics.
And they are the ones who made this nice screen for you that is behind you even now.
That's right. They asked what they could give me as a going away present, and I invited them to do each a panel of calligraphy, and then I had the screen made from what they gave me, 8 of them.
Wow. And these people welcomed you.
It was a remarkable situation. I don't know how much we want to talk about that, but I knew a fellow in Gwangju who was well connected throughout the province in South Cholla. And when I first arrived in Korea to do my field work, I had contacted him, and I went to see him. And he looked at a map that I had, which was a map of the entire province. And I had 2 places picked out as possibilities based on their locations and ease to get to medical facilities, because I was bringing 2 little kids. And he pointed to one and he said, "You want to go to that one? And that's the one you're looking at right here." And he said, the reason is that these people are cultured and educated. They have, a tradition of Yangban officials in Seoul, a couple of them, and they're people who will understand what you're going to do, and they'll help you. And
now, I know that man. His name was Lee Jae-soo. He was the Samugukjang administrative affairs head at Cheonnam National University. And he actually called for someone who works for him, who's from the village, to
that's
come
right.
help
He
you
said-
get introduced. Is that right?
He said, I've got a guy downstairs who's working for me. I'll have him come up. And the fellow came up and we talked, and I went with him the next day to this village. And we went, we met with 3 people. We met with the Semao Undong-jang, the head of the new community movement, the fellow who was the most senior generation and eldest of that generation of the dominant patrilineage in the village, and the fellow who was the eldest son of the eldest son of the eldest son of the eldest son, going back 450 years in the dominant family there.
Would it be called a Chipsangchon or a Tansangchon, a single surname village? It wasn't a single surname, but you had one dominant.
There was a dominant lineage in 3 sections of the village, and I was in that part. So yeah, it was kind of one big family, and everybody, you could tell who was who by their names, right?
Oh yeah, by the generation of name.
Totally.
Yeah. And one of the things you did, to jump ahead just a little bit, was to look at how age and status and other markers interacted with each other. Is that right?
That's right. Well, I originally got interested in a particular thing about Korean language and culture. And, I've talked about this, but there was one day when I was a missionary, I met a fellow who was an older gentleman, an historian, and he spoke down to me as though I was a child in the
Panma.
Hera Panma.
Yeah.
I was speaking very politely to him, and he spoke down to me like I might have been his son or maybe his grandson. And I had this was after I'd been in Korea for over 2 years. And it was the first time anybody treated me with that kind of intimacy or familiarity. He treated me like I was a Korean. And it was my first experience with that, and it felt fantastic. It had a lot of power.
And Westerners don't understand Panmal very well. It takes a long time to get into it because we're so egalitarian, and a person could be offended if the Panmal is used on them. But you took it not as offense, but as consideration and even intimacy.
It made me feel like I belonged in the country for the first time in my life in 2 years.
For my Korean audience, the word of the day is epiphany. Epiphany. That's to see something you've never been able to see before. So that was an epiphany for you.
Yeah. I thought, wow, that's powerful stuff. And I started thinking about the language, the levels of language in Korean. You have Hashiop so, and that's what we use at church sometimes. And then there's Hashimida, which is very honorific and formal, and Haseo, which is still polite. And then there's what the village folks called Haso, which is down, but not all the way down. And then there's Hera, and absolute no polite endings at all. You're speaking down, and you get to do that with your high school classmates, turns out. Tonggi Tongchan, the people who are the same grade and age as you are. And so Korean society is somewhat organized around who can talk what way to whom. And I was fascinated by that.
So as an anthropologist, you were really a sociolinguist.
Yes, I did what's called linguistic anthropology, perhaps within the discipline of cultural anthropology.
Yeah.
And so my focus was on language. I went to the village to listen to people talk to each other and see how that reflected who was who in the society, in the structure of that community. And there were some pretty interesting things that happened.
Well, that's great. Let's look at a couple of the things that an anthropologist would do. Some of the things that are on our set of slides here that you've provided. We got to these two older gentlemen who you say were scholars and of the old order, the old world order. And then you attended every kind of ceremony you could attend. Here's a wedding.
Ceremonies are powerful because they're symbolic of what people think of who's who and how people are related.
And here's a wedding table with all sorts of fertility symbols on the table. Here's the bride and the groom looking very happy on their wedding day.
They're not supposed to look happy.
They're not supposed to. It's a serious affair.
If you smile, it's bad form. So.
But everyone else around is sort of smiling and chuckling, and this is a grand.
Everybody's having a good time, but them. Yeah, that's right.
And you'd go to funerals.
Funerals were
burials.
Unimportant.
Yeah.
And these guys were singing a chant to help the spirit of the dead person be at peace and go off where he's supposed to go.
And then you have the graveside ceremonies of various kinds. Here's giving up food at one of the ceremonies for everyone to take home afterward. Is that right?
Oh yeah, people took a lot home, but we also had feasting at the site. This is the big family, the extended family during the autumn and the spring. they would get all these food offerings together and then take them up to individual graves and do the ceremony there.
Then here's
let
a
these
graveside ceremony.
let the departed ancestors know that we're still thinking of them and care about them.
And lots of
Yeah.
food that's prepared for them, but that we're going to eat after the ceremony, right?
The spiritual food was eaten by the spirits and the physical food was eaten by the physicals. So it was good time.
Now, you first went to the village, what month of the year?
Well, I went in November, but I was there I was there with my research associate, and he was a graduate from Seoul National University in anthropology. So he was a great person to be with, and he spoke a lot better Korean than I did.
And you're
Mine was
still
okay.
close friends with him.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
He's a wonderful fellow and ritired now, but
So you were
very
there.
successful.
You were there for several months into the springtime, basically by yourself, and then your wife and 2 children joined you.
That's right. My son was born in August. I had a daughter and then a son born in August before I left. And my wife didn't feel comfortable taking this newborn baby. And so we waited till he was a little older. So
And
she came in
when
March.
Nancy shows up,
Yeah,
everyone in the center of the picture right here, look, this is a Western woman dressed up in what kind of garb is this, Paul?
well, that's the traditional bride's outfit, just like the one you just saw. And I apologize. I don't remember why we took black and white, but we had some black and white photos of the wedding. And
There's the bride
there
on
she
one
is.
side of the table, and on the
Isn't
other
she
side,
lovely?
lo and behold, who is that?
The anthropologist.
The anthropologist doing the ceremony, not just watching the ceremony. And
Yeah,
here's a color picture. You can't see much, but Nancy is with the colorful costume there in the lower center. So you
Yeah.
did a full-fledged wedding ceremony as a way for the village to welcome Nancy to the village. Is that it?
That's right. They even prepared a document, but it was an excuse for a party and for me to entertain my hosts because they were particularly helpful and I don't know, solicitous. They really took care of me. They were wonderful.
Huh.
And it was a pleasure to do something good for them.
So here's the bride and groom and 2 children. My goodness. What was it like for them?
They had a great time. Maybe if we do another one, I'll get a picture of David, my boy, on the back, on his mother's back in a podegi.
Oh,
She carried him around on her back like the other ladies in the village. And Elizabeth, better known as Lammy, played with the kids and learned to swear like a proper Korean kid.
one of my favorite stories. One of my favorite stories about Elizabeth is she has that beautiful blonde hair, and she's what, 2-ish, nearly 3 here.
2.5, yeah.
And
like
she's you go to the market, and all of the Ajima would want to pet her beautiful hair. Well, she didn't like that. And she'd say, Hajima Sakia, which is kind of foul language. So this blonde little angel is swearing like a sailor.
She had more serious words than that. We won't repeat here, but in any case, it only made them think she was even more cute than she was when she was able to get after him like that.
And they liked her even more after that.
Yeah, they did.
What's this picture about?
Okay, this one is a very strong memory. I'd been in the village for maybe 6 months, and these triplet girls were born to a very poor family, a couple. They actually had 2 other children already.
And they were both blind, is that right?
They were deaf.
Oh, the mother and father were both deaf.
Yeah,
They got two
could
hearing
see.
children, and now they have triplets.
Now they have triplets, and they were poor. And some of the women in the village came to me and said, you know, these one or two of these babies is going to die. Their mother can't feed them all. If you wanted to help, you might buy some formula for them. So we went to the market in Gwangju and got some cans of formula and brought them back to the village, and they fed these girls on formula, and they survived.
And you're in touch with them today. You've seen them in recent years.
Well, I haven't seen the girls, but I inquired about them, and they all survived. They all married, and they have their families, and they've done okay. I don't know where they ended up, or you know what their socioeconomic level of living is, but they survived.
Wow. Well, all of that experience, profound human experience, has brought you to this, where you teach business people how to get along with each other and make better business. Most anthropologists with a PhD from Harvard or anywhere end up in academics. But you were in academics for a while, but you found yourself moving into this direction. How did the village teach you what you're doing today?
I learned a lot about interpersonal relations at the village. Now you're going to distract our listeners by showing them my daughter, who is now my business partner, and me in a workshop. But we're talking about people stuff. If you think of a business consultant, that's usually about strategy and how to beat the competition, but that's not my gig. My gig is actually illustrated on that flip chart. If you read Chinese characters, I guess most of our audience won't. The one at the top center, just that little stick with a leg, that's the Chinese character for person, in. And if you follow this around, I said, okay, our work is about people. And if you put that character on its side and use the Chinese character for two, that means what should be the relationship between two people, which is also called in. And it's platonic love. It's caring for each other as fellow human beings. And if you do that, great things will happen. That's the next character, which also has person in it. It's great for Te on Tong Demun, great East Gate. And then is the next one, and that has the character for person in it. So that creates, and the last one is heaven. So all of those are based on the character for person. So I'm telling my people in my workshops that if you pay attention to relationships and build good ones, treat people with kindness and courtesy and proper etiquette, that you'll be successful in business. And I learned a lot about that from the way people taught me and treated me in the village.
That's an amazing story, to go from, you know, that rudimentary lifestyle, looking at rudimentary human experience, and to extrapolate it to a very sophisticated world that you live in today. I mean, it's very sophisticated.
Well, I think you have to keep in mind that in all cultures of the world, there are sophisticated technologies and economies, but human culture is already sophisticated everywhere. And these Korean people who lived a more simple life, plowed with an ox, you know, cooked their rice over a wood fire, they were advanced in the human skills. They knew about relationships. They knew about how to treat people with generosity, kindness, and encouragement and discipline. And they would get after you if you did stupid things, and they would tell you, which is part of being a good person, right? To help people grow and understand what's right and what's wrong. I did some stupid things, and they let me know, and And they just kind of took care of me.
One reason I wanted to talk to you about this is that when I'm doing my YouTube channel, I'm surprised at the responses I get from some of my audience about the tradition of Korea, the Confucianism of Korea, and these things that I like and admire as an outsider.
Yeah.
And some people just really blast Confucianism. They really blast the idea of the sunbi, the aristocrat, the yangban.
Mhm.
But you know, I'm afraid Korea is going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's some things to be corrected about interpreting Confucianism, but to discard it all is really a mistake. You know, Paul, we ought to get together again. I'd like to interview you about your views of class, because
Sure.
class, you use the word class and classy in the same breath. And there are a number of Koreans who look at class as the enemy, the bad, the evil days of the old days.
Well, it's about hierarchy in society, right? But
Yeah.
In business, I say there's a hierarchy of jobs, but there is no hierarchy of human beings.
Oh, that's a nice way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that next time. This has been
Okay.
a great introduction, a great overview. And if y'all like it, let me know in the comments, and I'll invite Paul to come back again. Paul, great visiting with you. Thank you.
Great to be with you, Mark.
Yeah, always. It's always
Thank you
good
for
to
the
see you.
opportunity.
We'll see you all
conversation.
next time. Bye.
Cheers.